In this lecture, we will talk about reproduction in algae, how the algae are reproduced. You all know that what is reproduction. Reproduction is a production of the new offsprings or the new generation from the parent cells. So, what is a reproduction? Here is a general overview of the reproduction. Reproduction is a biological process by which new individual or the new organisms produce their offsprings. Reproduction is a fundamental feature of all life which is present in the earth, which is present everywhere. Each individual organism exists as a result of the reproduction. So, reproduction is the major reason of our existence, or you can say, or the existence of every organism. Reproduction is a process which is a reason of the existence or the presence of every organism. So algae also has a reproduction process, and they have the different types of the reproduction. There are the three forms of the reproduction can be found in the algae, and these three forms are vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction, and sexual reproduction. Now we will see one by one what are these types of reproduction and what is meant by these types of reproduction. The first one is vegetative reproduction. Vegetative reproduction, vegetative body. What is meant by the vegetative body? Vegetative body, in case of the plants or in case of the algae, vegetative body is a body which is a general body, or which is not involved, the body which do not have any sort of the sex cells. So the vegetative body is is a normal body of any organism, or in case of the plants or in case of the algae, the main body of the individual is called as a vegetative body. In case of the algae, the general thallus of the algae is called its vegetative body. So what is meant by the vegetative reproduction? Vegetative reproduction, in case of the algae, it includes the methods of the propagation. Methods of the propagation mean the methods of the reproduction in which the portion of the plant body becomes separated off to give rise to the new individual. What happens in case of the vegetative reproduction? A part of the parent body gets detached from the parent algae, and that part which gets detached from the parent body, just that part give rise to the new individuals. That parts can survive by its own, and that part makes a new algae by its own. So such type of reproduction in which a part of the parent body gets detached and make a new individual, so such type of reproduction is called as vegetative reproduction. Why it is called as vegetative reproduction? Because the part of the vegetative body gets detached and give rise to the new individual. Vegetative reproduction also has different methods. The first method which is present, which is mentioned over here, that is the cell division, the normal cell division. If a algal cell divides into the two daughter cells, then such type of the vegetative reproduction is called as a cell division. This cell division is also a type of the vegetative reproduction in case of the algae. You all know about the cell division. Cell division takes place in the normal in every organisms, in the body of the every organisms, for the production of the new cells or the further production of the new organisms. What happens in this case? The mother cells divide and the daughter cells are produced. From one mother cell, the two daughter cells are produced, and they behave individually as a new algal cells. It is sometimes known as a binary fission. Cell division also called as a binary fission. We have talked about the binary fission in case of the bacteria, that in what happened in case of the binary fission, a parent cell gets separated by special walls or septa or mesosomes. In case of the bacteria, the parent cells get divided by the mesosomes, while in case of the algae, there are certain other separations are found, like septa or the cell wall. The parent cells divided into the two daughter cells, binary fission, binary mean two, and two daughter cells behave like individual algal cell. This type of reproduction is found in diatoms or euglena. These are the examples of algae in which the cell division or the binary fission takes place. Here in this picture you can see that the one algal cell, it gets divided into the two daughter cells which behaves like two algal cells individually. Now the second type of the vegetative reproduction is the fragmentation. Its name represents the whole story. What is meant by the fragmentation? Fragments, what are the fragments? Fragments are the small pieces, or the small parts, or the small segments, right? So the name of this type, like fragmentation, it is showing the whole story of the process. So what is fragmentation? In this case, the whole filament or the whole body of the algae, it gets divided into the different fragments, into the different segments, and all the segments it just give rise to the new individuals. All the segments or all the parts of the parent body, they behave like new algal cells. So the plant body, in case of the fragmentation, it breaks off into the several parts of the fragments, and each fragment develops into a new individual. This type of the vegetative reproduction is commonly found in the some filamentous forms of the algae, which forms a long filament-like structure like Spirogyra. The fragmentation of the colonies also takes place in the several blue-green algae. Here is the process. Here is a diagram which is showing the process of the fragmentation. What happens in this case, a long filamentous algae, it gets segmented or divided into the different fragments or the segments, and each segment or the fragment behaves like a new individual. Another type of the vegetative reproduction is hormone formation. What are hormones? Hormones basically trichome like structures. Trichomes, what are trichomes? Trichomes are hair like structures which are present on the body or on the surface of the algae. So when the trichomes or the hair-like structure on the surface of the algae, they are breaks in the small pieces of the two or the more cells. Such pieces are called as hormones. The pieces of the trichomes, what are trichomes? Trichomes are the hair-like or the thread-like structure on the surface or on the body of the algae, and when these trichomes breaks off, they give rise to one or the two cells. After their breakage, two or more cells are produced, and those cells are called as the hormones. So in some blue-green algae, the fragments or the hormones undergo a gliding movement which are called the hormones, and each hormone develop into a new plant. The fragment which are called as the hormones, and the fragments of the trichomes which are the thread-like or the filamentous part of the algae, and those separated parts which divided into two or more cells which are called as the hormones, and those hormones develop into a new plant. So all these types, in these case, you can see that the part of the parent body gets detached, and that part develop into a new individual. So these all are the types of vegetative reproduction. Such type of the reproduction is called as vegetative reproduction. So hormone formation, hormones which develop into a new algal cell, this is also a vegetative reproduction, and it can be takes place in oscillatoria and nostoc, etc. So these are the hormones. These structures are the hormones you can see in this picture. Right. Okay, the next one or the next type of the vegetative reproduction in the algae is Hypnospores or the cyst. Hypnospores or the cyst are nothing but they are just like the hormones. such multicellular, but they are the spore-like structure. They function as the perinating bodies. What is meant by the perinating bodies? Perinating bodies or the perinating organs are those organs which help the plants or the algae to overcome or to survive in case of unfavorable environmental conditions. So hormospores or the hormocysts, they are the perinating bodies. They are the bodies which help the algae to survive in case of the unfavorable conditions. What are the unfavorable conditions? Unfavorable conditions may be the drought, unfavorable condition may be dryness, or maybe or maybe excess cold, right? So hormospores or the hormocysts, they are the thick walled hormones. The hormospores are nothing but they are hormones, but they are thick walled hormones because their function is to help the algae to survive in case of the unfavorable conditions. During the case of the unfavorable conditions like dry conditions or the excess cold condition, so certain algae, they develop a thick walled structure around them, and that thick walled structure is called as the hormones. That thick walled structure is developed just to avoid the unfavorable environmental condition. Okay, the next type of the vegetative reproduction is the tubers. Tubers, what are the tubers? You might have knowledge about them. Tubers are the structures which have a large amount of carbohydrates or the starch stored in them. So they are also the structure which helps the plant or helps the algae to overcome the unfavorable environmental conditions due to the presence of the abundance of the starch. So tubers are the bodies, like you might have seen potato tubers. On the surface of the potato, there are sometimes there are outgrowths are present, and that outgrowths are full of the starch. And when they get detached from the parent potato, they can behave like a new individual. So same case can be happened in case of the algae. In algae, there are certain tubers like structures are found that are filled with abundance of the starch, and each body, each outgrowth or each the tuber like structure may give rise to a new plant or the new algae, for example Cara. Adventitious thalli or adventitious branches. Adventitious mean uh, extra branches, or which are the extra part of any organism. So special structures of the thalli, certain special structures of the algal thallus are formed which help in the vegetative reproduction, right? Means a certain special parts of the algal cells that develop, and those parts can behave like a new individual. Bulbils. What are the bulbils? Bulbils are the small bird-like structures. A small bird-like structures, they usually develop on the rhizoids of the cara, and they are called as the bulbils. And when they get detached from the parent body, they can develop into a new individual. What are the rhizoids? Rhizoids are the roots-like structure. Roots like, they are not roots in true sense, but they are the roots-like structure present in the lower autotrophs. Algae are the lower autotrophs, like while plants are the higher autotrophs. So rhizoids are the roots-like structure. They are present in the lower autotrophs, and bulbs are attached with the rhizoids in case of the cara. Cara is a type of the algae. Cara, in the cara, bulbs are bud-like structure. They are attached with the rhizoids of the cara, and when they get detached from the rhizoids, they develop into a new plant, or they develop into a new algae. So here is a picture which is representing the structure of the bulbs. You can see with the a long rhizoid structure, outgrowth is present, which is called as a bulbs, and when that outgrowth gets detached from the parent plant, it can behave like a new algal cell. Now, another type of the vegetative reproduction is echinids. What are echinids? It is a types of the reproduction which is the very common in the blue-green algae. These echinids are a type are a type in which the vegetative cell is thick walled and will overcome the unfavorable conditions. Sometimes they are formed in chain. Echinids basically are the specialized cells in the algae, which are the thick walled cells, and they are formed just to overcome the unfavorable environmental conditions. And when they get detached from the parent plant, they can behave as a new individual. Like in the picture, you can see echinids are the thick walled algal cells, and they are formed just to avoid the unfavorable environmental conditions. Each kinate may develop into a new plant. This type of the reproduction is found in Oidogonium, is algae, and Ulothrix. Adventitious branches and adventitious thalli both are the same. Adventitious branches are formed in the some large thalloid forms of the algae. When the algae are large, they have a large structure, so there are some adventitious branches, side branches are formed, and these branches when get detached from the parent plant, again when they in this case too, the certain branches are formed, and when they get detached from the parent plant, they develop into a new plant or the new algae. Adventitious branch like protonema formed on the internodes of the cara. There is an adventitious branch which is called as a protonema in case of the cara. In case of the cara, it is formed on the internodes of the cara. Internodes, which is a junction point between the two cells. For example, dictyota and fucus. In dictyota and fucus, these are the types of the algae. In these types of the algae, adventitious branches are formed. Like in this picture, you can see that a body of algae is divided into the various branches, and these branches when they get detached from the parent body, they can behave like a new alga or new individual algae. Right. Okay. The second type of the reproduction in the algae is asexual reproduction. What is meant by the asexual reproduction? Asexual reproduction is a mode of reproduction by which offsprings or the new generation arise from a single organism. In case of the asexual reproduction, only one organism is required for the production of other organisms, like. Not like sexual reproduction. Like in case of the sexual reproduction, two organisms like male and female are required for the reproduction, but in case of the asexual reproduction, only a single organism is required, and that single organism can be reproduced new generation. It is reproduction which is almost never involves the ploidy or reduction. The offspring will be ploidy or reduction, mean in this case no variations can be occurred, no changing of the genes can be occurred. A new individual will be same as the parent individual. The offspring will be exact genetic copies of the parent, except in the specific case of automixes. A more stringent definition is agamogenesis, which is reproduction without the fusion of the gametes. In the case of the asexual reproduction, no gametes are involved. What are the gametes? Gametes are the sex cells, like egg or the sperm. In case of the male, the sex cell is the sperm, while in case of the female, the sex cell is the egg, and these two are called as the gametes. But in case of the sexual reproduction, because only one organism is involved in the for the reproduction, so no gametes are required. This is also called as the agamogenesis. Agamogenesis means without the fusion of gametes. Usually the protoplast of a cell divides into the several protoplasts, and thereafter they escape from the mother and develop into a new plants. So what happens in case of the asexual reproduction? The protoplast of a cell divides into a several protoplast, and each protoplast can be behave like a new individual. What is protoplast? Protoplast is the portion of the cell without the cell wall. If the cell wall is removed, so the remaining portion of the cell is called as protoplast. Asexual reproduction is a primary form of the reproduction for the single-celled organism. So asexual reproduction is most commonly found in the single-celled organisms like archaebacteria, eubacteria and protists. So this is found in case of the protists or the lower organisms or the microorganisms. Many plants and the fungi reproduce. Some lower plants are also reproduced, and fungi are also reproduced by the asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction takes place by a variety of the spore formed in the different algae, and these asexual reproduction can be takes place by the different spores. Spores are the reproductive bodies, and these spores include zoospores. And furthermore, the first type of the spore which is involved in the asexual reproduction of the algae is zoospores. Zoospores are formed from the certain older cells of the filaments. They are formed by the filaments of the algae. The cytoplasm divides to form the zoospores, which are escaped from the mother cells. What happens in case of the zoospores? The cytoplasm of the algae divide to form the zoospores, and that zoospores, after their formation, they are escaped or they are separated from the mother cell or from the parent cell. They are always formed in the favorable conditions. Zoospores are formed only in the favorable conditions. What is meant by the favorable conditions? When the conditions are all the conditions are normal for the algal reproduction, like pH of the environment is according to the growth in is according to the survival rate, or you can say is according to the algae to provide the environment for their reproduction. When there is enough moisture, when there is enough oxygen, when there is enough carbon dioxide, or all the essential requirements are present for the reproduction of the algae, so such type of the environment is called as a favorable condition. The zoospores are always motile, means they have the flagella. So this is a picture which is showing the structure of the zoospores. Zoospores are motile because they have the flagella, and how they are formed? They are formed by the cytoplasmic division. The zoospores are the naked protoplasmic bodies which move by the flagella or the cilia. They have the certain they have the certain structures for the locomotion or for their movement, like flagella or the cilia. Cilia are the hair-like structures. They may be biflagellate, mean if they have the two flagella. They may be tetraflagellate if they have four flagella, or compound zoospores if they have large number of cells attached with them. And the example of the zoospores or the presence of the zoospores or the types of the algae in which the zoospores are present are oidogoniales and Bocheriaceae. The second type of the spores which can be found in the algae are Hypnospores. Hypnospores, when Hypnospores are just like the zoospores, but the only difference is Hypnospores are non-motile. They do not possess flagella. When motile phase of the zoospores is eliminated, the bodies are called Hypnospores. When the zoospores just lost their flagella, they are called as Hypnospores. The Hypnospores are produced when there is a lack of the sufficient water. When there is not enough moisture, then Hypnospores are produced. Algal flagella become disappeared at that time. These are covered by a thin wall but do not possess the flagella like the zoospores. They also germinate directly to give rise to the new plant. Hypnospores. Hypnospores, when they get the favorable environmental conditions, they just germinate or they just make a new algae. Hypnospores. Now the next type of the spores which are involved in the asexual reproduction in the algae is hypnospores. Hypnospores are the thick-walled Hypnospores. Now Planospores usually are the thin walled, but when they become thick walled, they just change into a new type of the spores, which is called as hypnospores. And hypnospores are developed in the adverse conditions when there is a drought condition, when there is a dry condition, or when there is a excess cold. In comparatively drier situation, the content of the mother cell round off and secrete a thick wall around them. When there is a dry condition, the parent algal cell or the mother cell, it gets round off and it secrete a thick wall around it to tide over the unfavorable conditions, or to overcome or to avoid the unfavorable conditions. These thick wall structure called resting spores or the hypnospores. So these are the structures of the hypnospores, those who have a thick wall structure around them, and they germinate or they break their thick wall when the condition become favorable. When the condition become favorable, the thick wall gets removed or gets disappear, and these spores develop into a new algae. Sometimes the entire cells as such become thick-walled to form an echinacea. They are usually produced at the approach of the dry and the hot weather. On the approach of the favorable condition, they germinate directly to produce a new plant or form zoospores. So, as I told you, when the condition become favorable, these thick wall gets disappear and the spores gets germinate and form a zoospores, because zoospores produce in case of the favorable conditions. Now another type of the asexual reproduction is Pamela stage. Pamela stage, this is the approach of the dryness, as when the plants are left on the moist bank by receding water of the ponds. The cells of the many algae continues to divide, but their contents are not liberated. So when there is a dry condition, when there is a lack of moisture, so the content of the algae, it's continue to divide, but their contents are not liberated. Contents are what is meant by it. Algal cells are going to divide it, but they are not going to separated from each other. And the mother wall, algal cells, they divides, but they do not separated from the each other, and the mother walls become gelatinous, thus forming a mass or the colony of the rounded cells which lie embedded in a jelly like substances. Means the algal cells are divided, but they are not detached from the each other, and they are embedded or they are packed in a jelly like substance formed from the cell wall. So such stage is called as a Pamela stage. Like in this diagram, you can see the Pamela stage of the algae, in which algal colony is embedded in a jelly like structure. The cells are divided, but they are not separated from the each other. So on the return of the favorable condition, the cells come out. When the favorable conditions come, so the cell from this jelly like material, they just come out as a zoospores or as a planospores, and they germinate to produce a normal plant or the normal algae, for example ulothrix, etc. Okay, another type of the spores are called as the autospores. They are just like a planospores, except they are the smaller in size. Autospores are just like a planospores, but they are smaller in size. They resemble in shape to the mother cell except in size. Each autospore gives rise to a new plant. Such autospores are reported from the many chlorococcales, for example Sandimas, etc. Sandimas is a algae in which autospores are found. Like in the picture, you can see the number of the autospores are found in this picture. Okay, another type of the spore is the endospore. What is meant by the endospore? Endo, which are formed inside the algal body. Spores are formed within the cells or within the algal body. The endospore forming cells behave as a sporangium. the cells in which the spores, the cells of the algae, the cells of the algae in which the spores are found, or in which the spores are formed, such cells are called as sporangium. On the approach of the favorable conditions, each endospore develops into a new individual, and such spores which are found in the cells of the algae, and the structure or the cells in which the spores are found, that structure is called, that cell is called as sporangium. And endospores can be found in the blue green algae. So here is a diagram which is representing the structure of the endospores which are found inside the cell of the algae. Cyst. Cysts are, I have told you about the cyst in the previous slide too, that they are the thick walled spores forming during the unfavorable conditions, or when the food supply, or even when the food supply is abundant. Food supply is there, but the environmental conditions are harsh, like dry condition or the over or the excess cold condition. During their formation, as in Vaucheria, the thallus becomes many-septate, and each chamber thus formed produce a thick-walled cyst. What happened in the formation of the cyst? Like in Vaucheria is a algae. The thallus of the Vaucheria becomes many-septate, means it forms a many separations, many walls, and each chamber-like portion or each separation thus formed, and each separate portion formed a thick walled structure around it, which is called as cyst. Like in the diagram you can see, around the algal cell a thick walled structure is formed to avoid the unfavorable conditions, which is called cyst. Sometimes the cyst may be formed in the rhizoids, as in the Butyridium, when they are called rhizocysts. If the cysts are formed on the rhizoids, so they are called as rhizocysts. Sometimes cysts divide further to form a number of microcysts. So this is all about the vegetative and the asexual reproduction of the algae.